Hey guys, Mr. Tweet here. So in this section, the first thing that I kind of did was I introduced you to this term marginal, and it's going to come up, in this section and the next section a lot, but it also comes up, throughout economics. So to kind of give you guys an example, let's say that I'm getting ready to, take two of my kids and we're going to head down to the beach we're going to get lunch at a taco shop, and we're going to go, surfing in the water for a few hours. All right. And then one of my kids, when we're getting ready to leave, one of my kids says, hey, can my friend Johnny come along? Right. So marginal cost, marginal benefit. Right. So we're going to bring Johnny along, right? One more person in tow. Maybe he's going to keep my son occupied, and then I can spend time, surfing in the water with my daughter, or who knows, right? But more fun because there's another friend coming along with us, and the kids get excited for that. And makes them have a better time, makes me have a better time, right? It's the marginal benefit. It's the extra benefit that comes from adding that one more person to the daily adventure, right? Now, marginal cost. How much extra does it cost to bring one more person with us to the beach, right? Well, marginal cost is going to be, the 10 minutes I have to take to stop by Johnny's house and pick him up on our way to the beach. The eight to $10 to buy Johnny a burrito at the taco shop when we go to get food. And then, I don't know, depending on how much little Johnny weighs, maybe a few extra cents of gas because the car is a little bit heavier with him in there. Who knows, right? So that's the marginal cost. $7 or $8 for a burrito, a few minutes of my time, maybe a few pennies for some extra gas, whatever. That's the marginal cost. Marginal benefit is the additional fun that we have. Notice that it's the extra that matters. It doesn't matter, like, I'm not looking at the total cost of the trip, or I'm not looking at the total amount of fun we're going to have. If the choice is, do we bring Johnny, it's how much extra enjoyment do we get, and what's the extra cost that comes along with that, right? So that's marginal. Now, the concept diminishing marginal utility. This idea of diminishing marginal is a really important idea in economics as well. And it's used to kind of explain a lot of things, right? And it's probably most obviously used with food. That if you go to, like, I don't know, buffet or whatever, or I don't know, when I was in high school, right? High school that I went to, we had off-campus lunch. It was great. My friends and I could pile into somebody's car. We could go buy lunch. We could come back to school for our next class. It was awesome, right? And so a couple of times, one of the things that we did for lunch was we drove to a donut shop in Pacific Beach that was near the high school where we went. And we each got our own box of a dozen donuts. And then we went in and we brought them with us into our fifth period class after lunch. We sat down and we started eating donuts while the teacher was teaching, and it was great, right? Now, here's the thing. You got a box of donuts sitting there, right? Well, I didn't eat all dozen of the donuts, right? I probably made a pretty good dent in that box, but I didn't eat them all. Why not, right? Well, because when you're really hungry, that first donut's really good. You eat it real quick and it's gone, right? And you're still fairly hungry, so that second donut is pretty good. Now, is it as good as the first? I don't know. Maybe, right? But at some point, right, for you, maybe it's like halfway through donut number one. Maybe it's donut number two. Maybe it's donut number three. But at some point, right, it's not as good as the one before it, right? Because you just had one. And so now another one just doesn't seem to do the trick like the one right before it does. I'd argue that, like, some ways that you like might see, we kind of know that this happens, right? So like yesterday for lunch, I made myself a grilled cheese sandwich, and it was really good, like gooey cheese, and it came out really well, right? So I'm eating my sandwich, and as I start getting like most of the way through that grilled cheese, the last few bites are just not quite as like, the first couple of, especially because I didn't get to eat yesterday until like 2:00. So I was busy doing Zoom, and I had a meeting, and it was just a day. And so like, the first couple of bites were like amazing. I was so hungry. And like those first few bites just kind of, really hit the spot. by the time I was almost done with that sandwich, I was like, it just, those bites aren't as good as the first ones, right? So I'm looking at the part of my sandwich I have left in my hand, and I started eating the crust bites and saving the center bites for the very end, because I knew, like, the utility of each bite is less than one before it, but that gooey center bite was going to be like way better than anything else. So I was saving that big utility boost for the end. Like, that's just, you know, the more we consume of anything, the less utility we get from it, right? Food is the most obvious example, but it's true of anything, that, we could look at, whether it's like, um, going to the movies, or hanging out with your friends, or, with a spouse or a loved one even. Like, it's when you've dated someone for a long time, it's, the magic is not the same as when you very first start dating them. When you very first start dating someone, it's always like awesome and magical, and then diminishing marginal utility kicks in. And the more time you spend with them, you just don't get the same utility that you did before. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, like, there's definitely kind of, ways to try to keep your relationship fresh, and to try to kind of, reinvigorate and put more utility back into it. And, that's why people say relationships take work, because of diminishing marginal utility. That if you don't work on your relationship, it's going to atrophy and it's going to die. And that's, divorce rates, we can talk about all of that stuff, right? Why is that, right? Well, because when you first are together with someone, it's magical, and that's awesome. But if you think that magic's going to last forever, right? I don't know, maybe it does in Disney movies when they say happily ever after, but the economist is going to tell you, in the real world, diminishing marginal utility is going to kick in, and you better have a plan for how you're going to work on that, right? Otherwise, it's not going to end in a good spot. So that's diminishing marginal utility. The more you consume of anything, the less utility we get out of it. It doesn't have to be from 1 to 2. The utility can go up to begin with, but it's always got to go down at some point. So you might have something where, like, the first one isn't the best, but then the second one is better than the first, and the third is better than the second, but the fourth or fifth or sixth, or some point it starts going down, right? The classic example that in college courses they use for that would be beer. That the first beer gives you a little buzz, the second beer gives you a little bit more of a buzz, third beer you're feeling really, really good, and fourth beer it's not, it doesn't do as much as the third beer did, and then the fifth beer doesn't even do as much as the fourth, and then you're hungover. And it's if we're drawing a graph of this, and we will, right? The utility, maybe it just kind of plateaus and drops off. Sometimes maybe it goes up, but then it's always going to drop off at some point. It doesn't have to go negative either, but it can go negative. We're consuming more of it is actually like, if we're talking about like going back to the dozen donuts, like donut number 1, really good. So if we have our graph, it's like way up top, and then donut number 2, even better. And then donut number 3, not as much utility, and 4, not as much utility. And then if you eat donut number 5, maybe you go below 0, which means it's actually like, it's not only is it not providing additional utility, it's making you feel uncomfortable. It's taking utility away, right? Eat so much you don't feel good or something like that, right? So anyways, that's diminishing marginal utility. The more we consume of anything, at some point, the additional utility is going to be less. It doesn't have to be negative, but at some point, each additional unit is not going to give you the same, utility feeling that the first one did, second one did. Right? That's diminishing marginal utility. All right, see you guys in a bit.